success is the contentment I have today, but real success will be knowing that I delivered it and had the impact that I have in my head of being able to help all those people that I know I can help with by doing the thing that I love.
Hi, and welcome to A Class of Their Own podcast, revealing the human stories behind their name. We will hear honest and intimate reflections from our guests who, despite their circumstances, shape a world that reflects their unique visions of success. Join me, Mira Magecha, to learn from these inspirational people and take the first step to make your own change. And so what was some of that impact? What was
so it was everything from, like some of the work was incredible, like from launching YouTube as a commercial business in the UK, so as an advertising sales thing, but completely reinventing how we were doing B2B marketing, how we would tell those stories. So you're helping to grow businesses. But, a lot of the stories that I would choose, so I was the curator of the stars of a campaign or the big events that we would do where you were platforming people where it meant something. You were going to make people stars in some respects. Being the curator of that allowed me to be smart about who I picked and who were the ones I was going to support and who actually I could spot an opportunity that a normal commissioner wouldn't have done.
Yeah.
And so I could see that without, I didn't need to announce to go, we're going to be really diverse on this campaign. I just did it.
You just chose the right
did
people.
Because these are the right things. I'd intentionally overlook the things that I knew other people might have been looking for. Someone would have said, right, well, we've ticked off ethnic diversity or we've ticked off accessibility. I'd almost not mention that. Instead, I'd talk about their story and say, oh my God, they learned how to film and they were at university or from YouTube and then they did this and they did that and then they got a deal with the BBC and then they made a documentary without even mentioning the fact that they were working class and they were brown and black and neurodiverse or whatever it was, because it didn't matter.
Yep.
And I think that was a huge amount of success that I had in bringing to the front what people used to say was going, God, you're really good at picking rising stars. You're really great at doing this. And in my head, I used to think, I'd not thought of it like that. I am just really good at listening and being curious and looking in places that, to be quite honest, everyone else wasn't looking.
Yeah.
And so the impact for the business was significant because we became a more human, more accessible, more relatable business. I helped build the brand and the reputation. Obviously not the brand, Google was very well known, but who we were as a character in the UK and our reputation, which was tough as a big American business everyone hated in some respects, but also loved because they loved our products. It was shaping who were we. So actually giving identity and giving identity through the identity of others. And that was just brilliant because it meant I met so many wonderful people in that time. And my incredible sense throughout my entire life of just never being fazed to go up to someone and go, hello, and particularly famous people that others would go, my God, you can't go and speak to them, or CEOs. I'd be like, of course you can, they're just us. Opened a lot of doors, wrote a musical for James Corden, got him over to the UK to do that for us for YouTube, worked with Auntie Joshua and Marcus Rashford, who I reached out to when he was doing his campaign to help feed kids. And I could just spot an opportunity to go, this doesn't make sense because everyone's very helpfully putting up the restaurants available on Twitter. But, how do you find that? If you're in that moment of need, and as someone who has been in moments of need, I'm not going to go, hold on, let me go on Twitter, then I'm going to figure out how to search. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
And I could see technology could solve the problem, which was my entire career at Google, was figuring out how technology and creativity could solve problems. And I literally found a way, got someone to find a way that I could phone his manager. And I remember at the time them thinking, what? You want to help us? You're Google. What do you want from it? And I said, I don't want anything from it. I just think I can help you with this. We can solve this through maps. And I hadn't asked anybody internally, and Google, like a lot of large businesses, is incredibly bureaucratic and process, quite rightly so, for it has to have the right things in place. So I thought, if I ask someone, I'll spend like 5 weeks trying to just convince someone to they should do it. So I thought, sod it, I'll just go and see what happens. And he said, yeah, okay, fine, we love this. Can you help us? So then I get to go back to the engineering team who worked on maps and found someone and persuaded them, told them the story and said, look, we can help loads of kids and support Marcus Rashford. Can I do this? So these engineers gave up their time, spare time, to build this thing in maps. And that was really amazing, but very indicative of my style, of that kind of spot an opportunity and just go for it and ask for forgiveness afterwards.
So why leave?
So the kind of wheels came off a little bit from this rather magical journey and job when, well, it was probably a number of things. So there was one, in a workplace environment, it was becoming harder and harder to operate in that way. As Google became bigger and more complex and more convoluted, like most businesses, it became more restrictive.
Yeah.
So the opportunity to go, there's something, let's go do it and do that was definitely becoming few and far between. And some of those people that had created those spaces and opportunities for me were moving on. So it became even harder. So I wasn't in that same energetic burst of learning and pushing. I've always worked in quite entrepreneurial environments, from teletext and growing and building that and changing it, to the agencies, to even those early years at Google. I may have been big business, but it was very different environment. All of a sudden, I found myself in the slow lane of corporate life. So I didn't feel like I was learning as much, and it wasn't feeling the energy as much as I had before. And just, I think I was getting to a point of going, I don't know if I can have the kind of impact I want to have here, in that I can have incremental improvements each year, but it's not going to be seismic. And I, at home, was feeling probably equally stuck, in the sense that, we were great friends, but, where was this going to evolve to as things were going forward? And like the pandemic, like for a lot of people, amplified how stuck I felt. And I felt, and as well as going through perimenopause, which I didn't know I was at the time, and really struggled to get diagnosed with it, but knew something was really off from having been this very vibrant and optimistic. And even when I've been knackered and burnt out, I still had this energy. I'd lost it all. It's like I'd lost my sparkle, which is why I always call it, I'd completely lost my sparkle.
And so when you think about everything that was going on at this point, the kids are slightly older, the pandemic's going on, work is work, and it's lost its sparkle. I love that. But you've also got challenges with your relationship, I'm hearing. How do you make decisions at this point, and your perimenopausal?
Well, my menopause doctor said, don't make any decisions.
Of course. And so
she's like, do not make any decisions. I made decisions anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, you went and did them straight away.
To be fair, I took a long time to come to the decisions I came to. And I think the catalyst for me was that, was twofold. So one was, look at from a career point of view, I looked ahead and thought, I can't see myself here. And I knew it wasn't making me well. I knew I wasn't happy. And it was almost like, I don't know if that's making me unhappy, which is why I'm not who I should be at home, or if it's because I'm not fulfilled at home that I'm less tolerant of how I feel at work. But this sense of feeling unfulfilled in both places was like, I just don't know which is,
triggering which,
cause and effect. You have no idea. And so I probably in my head was thinking, well, I'm going to unpick the work one. And then, but I was like, my confidence was dropping. And it's a really, I know myself and I advise other people, but, you ride curves in your career. I was definitely on the slide down, and I needed to be careful that I was going to kind of, pull myself out of that dip. So I knew something had to change, but to kind of take the leap to go, right, I'm going to go and do something myself, which I'd always had a burning desire to run my own business, be my own boss. I've probably hated having bosses or being parented, so I needed that freedom. And Dan was always very incredibly supportive of that. But I just needed that strength somewhere. But kind of once I'd locked in and made the decision, then I was like, right, that's what I'm going to do. And I was scared to walk away from security, financial security particularly. But I turned 50. And I remember in that moment, and certainly the year or so leading up to that moment, to think, I could live another 50 years. And I think my grandma had died not long before that. It was 90. My mum had died and she was like 98 or something. And you're thinking, God, I could live another 50 years. I can't live like this.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do another 5 years at Google, because then I'll be 55. And then is that going to be too late to start a business? I don't know. And I've got these things I want to do. So I think once I make a decision, then I'll stick to it. Then I'm completely quite bloody minded about it.
Yeah.
And
it was just getting to that point.
It's just getting to that point, because you fear, nothing more than fear. Yeah. And it was great help and advice of, a friend who said, write a work bucket list, which I'd never done. You have to kind of go back deep into going, what do I want to do? Like, what actually makes me happy?
Who am
You
I?
lose through life, you lose touch with all those things. And I literally went back to like 15-year-old Nishma. What did 15-year-old Nishma dream about? What does she want? And I found a diary in this really bizarre time. And actually, it wasn't when I was 15, it was a bit older, but it looked like I was 15 because it was silver writing on black paper, like a little girl. And I looked at it, it was like, you know, what I want to achieve in my work and what I want to achieve in my life. And it was really lovely because actually I'd achieved most of the things on there. And they were really lovely things like, you know, one day I want to go to Milan and New York. And I also felt really bad to think, God, I used to bitch about traveling so much. Whereas actually that was a dream one day at one time. And then on the other stuff, kind of aspiration stuff, again, I'd achieved most of them, but there were a few things on there. The TV presenter was still on there. There's a few things. And I was a bit like, I'm never going to do these things unless I just throw myself into it and do it. It'll be a new shape and a new thing. But there's something in it that's never changed in me. What I described for my strengths when I was 15, when I was 20, when I was 50, had never changed. And I was like, I've got to do something about this. And similarly at home, I decided that it was going to be kinder and fairer to all of us to call it a day before I hit that point where we hated each other. I so desperately still loved Dan and wanted to be his friend that I didn't want us to get to a stage where we would rip each other apart. And I'd seen friends go through that and I just didn't want to be one of those people. And a little bit like, I'm going to do life differently. I'm going to do divorce differently. I'm not going to be textbook. And that was one of the things I found really hard in that time when I was building up to that moment. I remember my style of solving a problem is I will read and I find resources. I find stories, basically. I try and find a story of somebody else, because in my head, I always think millions of people have gone before me. I'm not the first person to have experienced this.
Yeah.
So I go in search of other stories and I'll read them and go, oh, okay, it's going to be better. I remember with having the twins, I was like, oh my God, does it get better? And you meet something and sees, well, like it does. And the thing I found so frustrating is there were hardly any stories of amicable separations. And I found that really frustrating. And I was like, well, there's got to be stories of divorce that are people are still friends and they make it work and that. And there were a few. There was like, you know, Mother Pucker, lovely. I completely forgot her name. Completely gone. Anna Whitehouse.
Yeah.
Who's been very open and talked about. But they were often a lot younger than me with younger kids. So it's really difficult finding that relatability. Anyway, you kind of get to a point where you go, bite the bullet, and we did separate amicably and still remain the best of friends. And it's been really, really hard and very sad. And we still both have, you know, bouts of loneliness and sadness. But we've are also really proud of how successfully we're now navigating this stage of our life. And I think that's that critical point of kindness, which we both come from. And the kids are great about it. So, like, you know, that's always the worry. I would have stayed for as long as I had to stay for the sake of the children. But when you start to realise, and what I felt really strongly about was I wanted to send a message to my kids that both me and Dan valued ourselves enough and our happiness enough that we would put ourselves first. Because what I didn't want to send as a message to my kids, which I realised I was starting to, was not just, you know, had they seen a picture of what true love was and if that even exists, but sometimes in life you've got to put yourself first and value yourself enough. And I realised at that point, I don't think I'd ever valued myself enough.
And
up
why?
to the age of 50. I just haven't. I think that insecurity of whether it was feeling abandoned when I was little or ignored or just not feeling like I fitted in. You know, that bit going back right to the beginning of our story is that sense of not belonging, like I said, I think is a superpower. Being a kind of happy outsider. But it's also a weakness. And the weakness is a continual level of self-doubt, a crippling level of self-doubt, and therefore unable to equate worth to it as well.
Have you done any self-awareness, therapy, coaching, all of that kind of stuff to get to this level where actually you feel you're worthy of it all?
No, and I really should. We used to joke sometimes at home, me and Tam, like, he said, you can't have therapy, so we'll have to bloody remortgage the house, how much you're going to need. And I don't know, and I really would love to have therapy. Do you know, weirdly, I think my therapy is doing podcasts. Like, this has been therapy, I remember from the first time we spoke, because none of us ever stop enough to think about our story and our reflections. And I don't think you do until an older age, which is definitely the lesson which I would teach everyone, to say reflect way more and more regularly. I think now I realise what a inhibitor it is for me to move forward. So having left Google and my marriage, it unfortunately happened at the same time, wasn't intentional to happen at the same time.
Yeah.
Just over a year ago, I left Google actually only just earlier this year. I have been starting a new business and the gremlins are still there. So I convey an incredibly, confident and positive and optimistic outward. And I am, those things, none of them are fake. They're absolutely real. I am that person. But I also have another gremlin on the other shoulder, which is the constant nagging doubt and lack of self-worth. And I've got to find a way to deal with that. And whether it's Dan has said it to me or friends have said it to me or bosses have said it to me, I do need to figure out how to get out of my own way, because it'll be the undoing and I won't allow that to happen. But I need to find a really good therapist.
This episode is brought to you by Play for Change. Play for Change brings together leadership coaching, expert facilitation, and builds communities. They help craft real connections, spark learning, and turn play into powerful experiments to enable better relationships with yourself and others around you. To find out more, go to playforchange.co.uk. Links are in the show notes below. Either that or it'll be the suppression of going, ignore this until the pressure can no longer take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you are, because if I think about how our conversation started, the tone of voice, the hands, the language, and now we're a little bit softer. And that's because you've got into a bit more of a conversation. You're probably feeling a little bit more comfortable or more uncomfortable, depending on how that might be. Where are you today?
So I'm probably the most relaxed and content I've ever been in my life. In the sense that I am still chasing things, but I'm not chasing the rabbits as I have been before. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't in that constant, desperate pursuit of I've got to get enough money to be able to live. I've got to be able to do this. I've got to want to have kids. I want to be able to just stay awake long enough. I want to be able to succeed. I'm not in a race with anyone other than myself now, which is the most liberating thing in the world, which is why I'd probably struggle to go back to a corporate job, because I feel energized and excited about the adventure ahead of me, even though there is no certainty,
of course,
in front of me at all. I've never had certainty, but I think I'm really attuned to that, to go, fine, well, I haven't got certainty, I'll figure it out. So definitely the most relaxed and happy and content in that way. I'm also the most aware of, not is this my last chance? The jeopardy that exists now is, partly because having not done the work that I probably should have done on myself, is the one thing I'm fearful of is a mishap or a considerable failure is greatest to me than to anyone else. So it's not in pursuit of doing something to worry about letting someone else down. If it goes wrong now, the only person I will ever let down is me. And that's the thing that keeps me awake at night. That's the thing that's which I just why don't I trust myself more? Because I do in so many ways, that I don't think you can be kind of a real hustler and a maverick and have the ambition that I have. And I'm so motivated by helping others. And I approach everything with boundless energy, so I've created the glitter sphere, which it will be live soon, which is this, it's female focused. It's about helping women be who, from going from unseen to unforgettable. I built a personal brand, probably not knowing I had, or intentionally, I definitely didn't set it. I think every job I've ever done never had a fancy name when I did it. I was a coffee girl and then it's a barista now. But anyway, I built this personal brand over the last however many years of my life and my career, unintentionally. But I have one now. And probably more because someone said that to me than I recognised it myself. And I know why I did it now, and I've stopped to reflect, even though I kind of was just in there doing it. And I did it because I wasn't seen. And I had to fight harder to get heard. And I had to fight harder to be taken notice of. And I wanted to also get over my own self-doubt and worry. So I wanted to push myself into spaces to go, no, look at me, I can do this. Or let me share what I know and let me help other people. So it wasn't all about myself. Actually, it was actually not focusing on myself and helping others that built this personal brand, and recognizing it had real power to it. I was helping people, that actually that was my fuel, not all this other stuff that I thought it was. The fuel was seeing other women particularly, but not just women, anyone, that I'd help them. And I was like, wow, that's without getting really worthy about it, purpose. And so if I can help more women to do that, to help them succeed in their careers or their businesses, or to raise more investment, because we still live in the most ridiculously unjust and unfair, unequal world. And I feel that for young men as well as for women as well. I think it's as tough for young men, and I want to be able to help and be supportive there. But I know I have a gift. And so stories have helped me unlock so much in my life. And I'm really good at helping other people unlock their stories. Also allows me to not have to worry about my woes. But that's the glitter sphere is there as an expression of me. It's intentionally named something that's, important to me. And it's a 360 sphere of how I help people. And it's this idea of radiating life and light and creating a space that's never existed in my time of working. It takes me back to that 4-year-old Nishma dancing by the speaker in the land of disco. But it's also that, I think there's no space more democratized than a dance floor. You are your individual self on a dance floor. It doesn't matter what your job is, or whether you're a mum or not. It doesn't matter. You are you. And so hence the glitter sphere, to create a space for women to really unlock their true selves and authenticity, and then for me to help them with their stories and their storytelling to become more visible and ultimately unforgettable in the way that they should be in achieving success in their careers or their business. And then alongside it, I'm also a co-founder in a business I'm also super excited about building, which is the first in the UK, the first female-led, female-produced podcast network. And that's about telling stories as well. So my 2 businesses and my entire time is spent on thinking about storytelling and thinking about others' stories and what I learn from them and how I can tell them and how I can facilitate that. So I love that. I mean, I couldn't be happier. I'm doing the things I really love doing. But it comes with a sense of responsibility. And it comes from being able to look in the mirror every now and then and go, can I do this? Even though I know I can in so many ways, but I still go, can I do this? And I think for me, I still am battling and have held on to, and I wish I didn't bloody hold on to it, things that are said to me. So I recently took myself on a writing course, a 1-day writing course, because I probably somewhere along the line, a teacher, and I think I know which teacher it was, had said to me, you can't write. And then I probably struggled. And then I did that thing with the journalist thing where I was like, I'm not very good at writing. So a combination of being told and telling myself over a very long period of time, I then said, I can't write. And actually, I can write quite well. So I thought, you know what, sod it, I'm going to put myself on this writing course. I went on this writing course, which was absolutely brilliant. And it was with all people that I would never necessarily have kind of been with or known. And everyone was like, I'm a writer in that. So I thought, well, sod it, I'll pretend I'm a writer because I'm never going to see these people again.
And now they're your best friends.
And now they're like, I'm like, shit, what have you written? Nothing? No. So, and I loved it. And I learned a lot from it. Also partly because actually, I do know what I'm doing. And I already was doing this, or, I can do these things and learn. But they set a challenge at the end of it, and you had to write for 10 minutes every day for 30 days. And just doing that unlocked so much happiness in me to go, I can do it. And so I've kind of been slowly like knocking off things that I've been doubting myself on, or have been little, kind of weaker points or things that I would hide in the shadows. I've just been pulling them out and dealing with it. And so that fills me with a lot of energy and excitement, and seeing the impact I'm having and the excitement of what might be. But there is always the pressure then to deliver.
But it's the bravery of taking them out of this box and going, I know these are present for me, but I need to now address them. I now need to make them visible. I now need to do something with that. And it's finding your vibe to say, I can do that in a way that's going to work for me. It can be journaling. And you know all of this, so I don't need to say that stuff. But it's been a fabulous journey in so many ways. What is the next chapter of success for you?
So the next chapter, I think, is now that I'm in this kind of comfortable space of being unapologetically me. I get to wear sequins every day. Yeah. I don't have any of the, I'm doing what I love in every respect, from skills, from helping people, being with women and others and men and creatives. I couldn't be happier in that sense. I'm designing a life that I wanted. Success, has changed for me. What I thought it was, what I was chasing when I was younger isn't what I'm chasing now. And so it's not about necessarily, the trappings and the smaller things. Success is the contentment I have today But real success will be knowing that I delivered it and had the impact that I have in my head of being able to help all those people that I know I can help with by doing the thing that I love. So, a successful business that has helped will be a sign of the fact that I've helped a lot of people. Because if I've helped all those women, and the reason why all of this came about from, again, not a reflection of my own life, which I now can do, and those my mum and my sisters and everyone else, is without money, you don't have choice. And it's haunted me my whole way through my life. And the things I did at work, I saw too clearly the impact I was doing at Google. I used to run this program called the Digital Skills, which is basically, we used to train people for free on digital skills, like to close the skills gap. And I always remember being in one of our spaces in Manchester at the time, and we just opened, and it was like a little shop in the town centre, which is very bizarre because people are like, why have Google got a shop? It was there literally to get people to come in, like go to where they are, get them to come in and learn skills. And this woman had come in and she looked basically how I felt, absolutely knackered. And I was like, yeah, I know you feel love. And I overheard her saying to one of the trainers, oh, I used to be a secretary 15 years ago and I stopped working because I had my kids, but I'd really like to go back to work, but the world's completely changed. I don't feel like I could go back to work. And they're like, yeah, we can help you. And off they go. And I'm like, oh, that's great. This is what we're here for. And then 9 months later, I happened to be in the garage. And just by pure luck, not arranged, she walks in. And she walks in, and I can still so vividly remember her. And she had this blue trouser suit on and her blonde hair tied up in a ponytail. And she walked in, shoulders back, so confident. It was like a different human being. So I thought, I've got to go and ask her what she does. And quite sadly, I was probably in my head thinking, I'll get a case study out of this, So I went up to her and was like, hi, I was here when you first came in. Can I ask you what happened in the last 9 months? And she was like, oh, yeah, your team have been amazing. And they've taught me all these digital skills. And I learned about this thing called being a virtual assistant. And I became a virtual assistant working from home. And then I had loads of friends who were in the same position as me. So I hired all of them to become virtual assistants. And so now I run my own business and I've got this. And I was just like, wow, this woman had, through the opportunity of the skill and therefore the money she made, she had become this confident, happy, in control woman. And I just thought, wow, this is the power of it. And that would have been enough. And then she leant into me and she said, and I left my husband who'd been abusing me for 20 years.
Wow.
And at that moment, and it still gives me spine tingles when I say it now, at that moment I remember standing there thinking, that's what it does. That's what having the economic means is, it gives you choice. And so whether it's my waxing lady who desperately wants to have a child and can't, and is exhausted all routes and now needs to find the money for surrogacy, and she has got the money and she's having to give up on a dream of having a family, or another person I know who's got a very controlling partner who means she has no economic independence despite her working all the time and she's just trapped in a situation, or a friend who hates the job she's doing and wants to go and be a DJ, or someone else wants to be a sabbatical and learn something. The single thing that bounds them is not just stepping over that threshold of fear or being encouraged, it's not having the means to do it. So my mission through Glittersphere and Hera, the podcast network, is not just to show the stories of relatability that encourage people to step across that threshold of fear and have the skills to do it, but to give the means that will allow choice.
Because that's what it is. It's
that's
choice.
What it is. And I think that's what has been my entire life, is going, I just have always wanted to have choice. I want to be able to make, so now I have more choice than I've ever had before, but it still comes with pressure. So success for me will be to know that I've achieved that, and to have achieved it in a way that has allowed me to continue to be in control of the choices I'm making. What I've learned to focus on and makes me much happier and definitely allows the checkpoints for achievement is who I want to be. And for me, 2025 is a year where I continue to get to be and breathing into being this person that overcomes some of those fears and lack of confidence or sense of achievement, but also gets to be that woman and that mum who is gloriously standing in her sparkle.
And how are you going to do that?
So I think that's around, I do stop and reflect a bit better now. I have this great technique of the left and right, so I look back 6 months, I look forward 6 months. So I don't just try and keep chasing and projecting forward. When I have that, as soon as I feel a bit stuck or I'm still a bit frustrated or I want to give up, I stop and I go, okay, what have I done? How did I get to this point? You know, I'm a big believer in that passage of time solves all problems. So I've learned to be a bit more fluid about the way I think about time. So that helps. I think the B is also I'm incredibly grounded. I'm lucky that I have so many people around me to keep me really grounded. But I think I've learned to look at other touch points around, you know, the quality of my relationships, the time I'm spending with people. You know, I think it's easier when there's lots of things you know you haven't done to know what you should do. Be much more purposeful about time. So planning the time that I put in, you know, things just don't just happen, but prioritizing that. You know, I actually now, for the last few years and continue to do so, I plan life around my family or my home needs.
Yeah.
Before it was my career needs and then family. Whereas now it's all designed around, okay, so, you know, the kids will finish their GCSEs at that point and that happens. I want to do that with my mum and dad and that with my friends. And then I put work on top of it. I didn't used to do that before.
Yeah.
And that's how I get to make sure I be who I be. I went on holiday on my own for the first time ever this year. It was the best thing I've ever done. I'm like, I don't know why I didn't do that before. And knowing to plan those things in. So as well as time for everyone else, because I'm very much deplete my energy and time by giving it to others because I like to. I've really learned about how I have to have time for me. And so I actually now plan those in.
Yeah. I went to Japan for 3 weeks on my own.
Oh,
it was the
wow.
most amazing holiday I've ever had.
Oh, God, I'd love to do that. I'd really love to do that. And I feel much braver about doing things. You know, for me now, it's not a case of, oh, my God, you know, when am I ever going to do it? No, I'm like, great, I'll just go do it. I'm no problem with doing stuff on my own. And 9 times out of 10, I meet other people who go, oh, I'd like to do that as well. Then off you go. But I think it's learning to know that there are, you know, I just write every chapter. I want to squeeze the most out of time. I do anyway. But I'm much more thoughtful about how I want to feel more so than ever. And I think just cutting ties, letting stuff go. I'm way more, you know, I'm just more peaceful. I just let stuff go. Don't let stuff rile me. I chuck it over my shoulder and go, it's behind me. It's in the rearview mirror. Don't worry about it anymore. It's done.
It sounds like at a certain point you were living to the end of the book and now you're living by section, or even if we think about it, maybe a chapter at a time, and just seeing where it goes and being curious and playful with how and where it takes you.
And almost not overthinking it too much, not going, right, by 60, I'm going to be this. I don't worry about that. You know what? I was thinking about this as I was coming over to see you. I was thinking, I think that weird pursuit I had for most of my life, which is why it's only been the last few years that I've really unlocked myself from it, was because in our culture, you know, we're so obsessed with kind of palmistry and readings and this sense. I had from such a young age drummed into me, like older Gujarati relatives have an obsession about death that I think is not necessarily true of all cultures. I've learned that. And there's this constant sense of, you know, I'm going to die one day and all this. I lived a life assuming, I don't think I'd even thought I'd get to 50. So this sense of like, you've got to get to that point, get to that point, was like, I was running to the end of the book. I wasn't going chapter by chapter because I thought I've got to get to the end of the book. Now, where I'm a bit like, oh, you know, whatever's going to happen, and there's a good chance I'm going to live for a very long time if I'm lucky enough. Going chapter by chapter is so much more easier and more peaceful and more enjoyable, and allows me to enjoy that moment than racing through something where I'm kind of just not even aware of what's happening.
We started this conversation with who's Nishma? Let's go straight back there. Is there anything you would add, change or adapt based on the conversation we've just had?
I would add, she's a fearless pioneer and maverick and pirate. That's it.
Amazing.
Fearless pioneer.
A fearless pioneer.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the conversation and sharing more of who you were.
Thank you so much for having me here, for encouraging me to open up the way you do. You've got a brilliant way to help people share their story.
If you enjoyed that conversation, please share A Class of Their Own podcast with your friends and family. Subscribe, follow and like. It really helps us continue to grow. Keep being you through connection, learning and play. You are a class of your own.